Hey, AlphiePrime, and believe it or not, I play video games. Yeah, crazy, right? Playing video games is what I like to do in my free time, and this year I decided to play a lot of interesting video games. Here's mostly everything I played. I forget a lot, so I might have left a game or two off the list. But here's everything I played and how much I enjoyed it. I'm not gonna go into too much depth, but I might be glad to do individual videos on these games if there's a demand for it. Let's start with games that I started last year but finished this year. Danganronpa Another Episode, Ultra Despair Girls. Ooh boy, starting off with a controversial one. I mean, the Danganronpa series is pretty divided in the public eye. Either you fucking love it or you fucking hate it. But even some of the most hardcore Danganronpa fans don't like this game, and there's reasons for that. I had just finished Danganronpa 2 Goodbye Despair in December of 2023 before playing this, and I really enjoyed that, so I was excited to play this. My thoughts? It's good, but not great. UDG being a spin-off takes things in a different direction, as it's a third-person shooter instead of a visual novel. However, it's not completely different, as it's still heavily story-based and there's puzzles to solve just like the first two games. The gameplay itself takes more priority than in other Danganronpa games, and it shows because the mechanics are fun. It does feel satisfying to kill Monokumas or solve one of the arcade machine puzzles. The range combat of Komaru with the close-up combat of Toko create a contrast in different gameplay styles, which is nice. Getting more truth bullets for Komaru and getting more upgrades for Toko was also nice. I mentioned the game still being heavy story reliant, however the story itself is not as good as the first two games. Danganronpa is no stranger to sexual or perverted humor, but it's used in some of the wrong places here. Toko often has some sexual fantasy about Byakuya. This isn't exactly new, since she was kind of down bad for him in Trigger Happy Havoc, and it was funny there. It's sort of funny here, but I feel like they show it a little too often. That, however, does not compare to Chapter 3's minigame, where you have to prevent Komaru from being groped by a machine. It's actually really gross. I know the sexual stuff has some importance in the story, but this was not the way to handle it. It really makes me wonder, what the hell were the writers thinking? Similar to this, Chapter 4's boss can tear off Komaru's clothes. And then we have Haiji Towa. Yeah, it's got its issues, but I still liked it. I like the two different playable characters. As I mentioned earlier, they made for some good gameplay, but also I really like their fun interactions throughout the game. I think the Warriors of Hope have potential as villains. Do I think they lived up to their potential? Other than Monica, no. But they still had potential. It was really fun finding characters who were related to the Trigger Happy Havoc cast. And I enjoyed seeing more of Nagito. Let's move on to Super Monkey Ball Deluxe. Package containing Super Monkey Ball 1 and 2. A lot of people don't like this as much as the Gamecube versions, but I think it's great. Having all the levels and new levels with all the minigames in one package is great. The original Monkey Balls are fantastic games. Basically, you gotta navigate your little monkey ball by tilting the stage. It requires a lot of precision, and it's very satisfying to complete a level. It itself isn't the greatest, but it's fine enough, and it's not as important as level designs, which are great. The original Monkey Balls have some of the greatest level designs in the entire series, which is insane and pathetic. The music is also great, and the minigames are top-notch. Monkey Bowling is my favorite. It's a shame it's not more readily available. The remaster exists, but if you want to play the original version, you gotta get a PS2, PS3, Xbox, or Xbox 360. Now for something a little weird, Mario Kart Live Home Circuit. This one is not considered a mainline Mario Kart game, even though Mario Kart Tour is. I got the Mario version for Christmas of 2022, which came with the Mario Kart and some goals to set up. The software was free on the eShop. It actually controlled way better than I expected. It actually feels like playing a Mario Kart game and not just controlling an RC car. Setting up the goals is pretty simple, but the arrow signs can fall down pretty easily. I can see how making tracks could be fun if you're the creative type. That I am not. So I just did an oval shape for every track, but honestly it worked fine enough. The tracks have visual and gameplay changes to make the track feel different. A lot of them weren't that memorable, but there were some cooler ones like reversing the controls and slippery ice. Seeing the real life camera footage on screen is really funny, especially if you see a person on screen. Sometimes I bumped into a gate and that kinda messed things up, but otherwise it was actually pretty smooth. The game itself was somewhat challenging. I had more fun than I thought I would. Now for another spin-off Mario game. This one Mario was barely in. Wario Land Super Mario Land 3. Yeah, it's not really related to the Mario Land games, but that doesn't matter. What does matter is, this is one of the best Game Boy games. Unlike the first two Mario Land games, which were typical 2D Mario platforms where you get to the end, Wario Land has more of a focus on collectibles. The amount of coins you get affects the ending you get, which I like because it gives you a reason to collect the coins which you would normally skip in a Mario game. Wario has a shoulder bash, which is very satisfying to use. You can also grab them and throw them at other enemies. Speaking of enemies, I'm glad they're not reused from Mario, but rather original enemies. I love Wario's sprites in this game. He has a lot of goofy expressions that really show off his character. Beating a level lets you play a game to earn some stuff, with the chance to lose some stuff instead. The levels are great. There's a lot more exploration than a typical Mario level. The graphics are great, especially for a Game Boy game. The music and difficulty are fine. Wario Land is definitely worth your time. Now we have Astro's Playroom. This came with the PS5 and I'm glad it did, because this game is amazing. There's a bunch of little levels that you're free to explore, and a lot of them work really well with the controller. There's a bunch of sounds and sometimes the triggers get all stiff. It works really well and really immerses you in the experience. There's a bunch of little details and references to old PlayStation stuff. It's amazing. I also really like the final boss. Short, but very sweet. And I really hope to play Astro Bot someday. We'll end this section off with Sonic Adventure 2. I played this to prepare for the Sonic 3 movie. I left off on Pumpkin Hill and I can see why I stopped playing. I hate the Knuckles and Rouge stages. I hate how the radar only detects one emerald at a time, and the locations are so precise. One Rouge stage has a time limit of 5 minutes and I have no idea how I passed that one. On the other hand, the Sonic and Shadow stages are really good. I've only played a little of Sonic Adventure 1, but from what I've played, this is much better. Fast-paced, 3D Sonic action that use the mechanics well. The Tails and Eggman stages are also good. There's a lot of shooting whatever's in your way, but there are some platforming elements too. It does a good job at making you feel powerful. And I like the health bar. The story is taken much more seriously than other Sonic games, and it shows. Many other Sonic stories are kinda garbage, but this one is great. It's a very different Sonic story that still fits in with Sonic. The cutscenes are not that great, but they were intended for the Japanese voice lines, so they get a pass. The upgrades are cool, but they can be easy to miss. This is especially unfortunate for one of Knuckles' upgrades, which makes the final stage much easier. Of course, I have to mention the amazing soundtrack. Live and Learn and City Escape are fantastic. One can be heard on the title screen, the other is on the first stage. So it does a good job at setting the tone for the game. The Chow Garden is a nice way to take a breather between levels. The multiplayer is fun and can lead to some hilarious moments. Overall, I'd say the game hooked me at the beginning, kinda lost me in the middle, but really brought me back in the end. The final boss is very easy but makes you feel epic. It may not be perfect, but it is a fantastic Sonic game. Now let's move on to games I started and completed in 2024, starting with a game I started on January 1st. Danganronpa V3 Killing Harmony. There are a lot of people who don't like this one and say it ruined the series. However, the reception overall is much more positive than UDG, and it's clear Danganronpa works best in the visual novel style. This game was quite interesting, as unlike Danganronpa 2, which had many ties to the first game, this one felt a lot more disconnected from both the games, almost as if it was its own separate story and not a continuation of the other games. That being said, the story is incredible. Admittedly, it has some of the lowest lows. Chapter 3 is not that great. The murder plan feels kinda dumb, but it also has some of the highest highs. The latter half of the game is absolutely incredible, with so many plot twists that really pulls your heartstrings. Chapter 4 actually made me cry, which no game has done before. I know a lot of people hate the ending, but I absolutely love it. Out of all the Danganronpa games, this is probably my favorite to replay for all the foreshadowing. The OST has some of the best music in the series. The theme for the daily life creates a nice atmosphere, which contrasts with the harshness of the killing game. The gameplay has also been refined and is some of the most immersive in the series. I made a video on it. The visuals of these games are absolutely gorgeous. The first two games weren't terrible, but you could tell they were PSP games. The visuals for this game are absolutely eye-catching. The bright neon blues and purples and pinks make the game look a lot more futuristic, I guess. The cast has some of my favorite characters, including my favorite protagonist. Not all of them are winners, but even the worst I can appreciate. Executions are the cream of the crop. After 2 kinda dropped the ball with the executions, 3 not only brought it back up to the standards of the first game, it exceeded them. These executions are absolutely brutal. The side modes are also the best in the series. Instead of 50-day resource garbage, you have stuff people care about, like gambling and love hotels. There's also the board game. It's alright. Danganronpa V3 is fantastic, and I'd highly recommend the series to anyone. So that's the official Danganronpa series, but I also played some fan games, starting with Danganronpa Another, Despair Academy. I was curious to see what other people could do with the Danganronpa formula. My thoughts? It's okay. The story felt really basic at the start, not really different from normal Danganronpa. It did ramp up by the end, but at that point, I felt like it was too late. My main problem is the gameplay. This whole thing feels very clunky, from the movement in the school to the trials. The shooting does not feel good. You can tell this gameplay wasn't meant for RPG Maker. I also had an issue in Chapter 5 where I couldn't save until the trial. And who the hell decided it would be a good idea to take away health for having to repeat a conversation? Man's Gambit was absolute hell. And the closing argument doesn't even penalize you. Let's not even get started on chapter 6.5. That can rot in hell. Now it's important to note that only the prologue and chapter 1 have official translations. Chapters 2 through 6 are fan translations. Look, it may seem like I'm just bashing on the game, but it is a good game. The cast is pretty cool in my opinion. When it's good, it's really good. It just has some rough parts around the edges. I'm also being a little harsh because the sequel is so much better. Super Danganronpa 2, The Moon of Hope and Son of Despair. Oh my gosh, this one was really good. First of all, the gameplay is so much better. Overall, it's much more refined and feels much better to control. That doesn't even compare to how good the story is. Holy shit. Some parts of the story in this game are better than the official Danganronpa games. It's that good. The ending really plays with your heart. While I felt like the first game was a little too similar to Danganronpa, this game really broke the mold and was really unpredictable. I gotta say, I was very emotionally attached to the cast. Solving the mysteries was fun. Not just the murder mysteries, but also the mysteries for the whole world. The pixel sprites on the overworld look really cute, and I much prefer the normal character sprites in this game over the first game. Seriously, this game is amazing. Play the Danganronpa and other games. Yes, both of them. I know I said some harsh things about the first game, but it's still worth playing, and besides, the second game has some stuff you need to play the first game to understand. This really shows what the fans can do with Danganronpa, and I'm not done talking about Danganronpa fan games in this video. Project Eden's Garden. Now this game is not finished. Right now, only the prologue and chapter 1 are released. That being said, this game shows a lot of promise and potential. The whole thing is really well made. Some parts of the game actually feel like V3. This engine is really good. The visuals are great. The models look really sharp, and the artwork is lovely. The cast is quite interesting and makes you want to learn more about them. That's aided by the lovely voice acting from all the VAs. The soundtrack fits very nicely, and the gameplay of the trial feels great to control. Chapter 1 had a lot of surprises, and I absolutely recommend experiencing it for yourself. I can't wait to see where this project goes. It really sets the standard for future Danganronpa fan games. Let's take a break from Danganronpa. WarioWare Move It! WarioWare was one of my favorite series, so I was excited to see what was next for the series. And it didn't disappoint. This is a sequel to Smooth Moves and retained a lot of the same weird wacky charm. The cutscenes and microgames are hilarious, and the fast-paced gameplay keeps you focused on everything. The positions were fun to play around with, and felt much more fun than Smooth Moves. The motion controls work really well mostly, but occasionally fucked up. It's short, but so is every WarioWare. You're not supposed to just play the game and be done with it, you gotta replay it and get the best score. Of course, there's multiplayer and it's really fun. I played it with some friends, and it got pretty intense. It may not be the best entry, but it's a great one. Donkey Kong Country. I always thought the visuals were impressive and played the first level a lot, but I never got to play the full game to form a full opinion on it until recently. I've concluded that it's great. Better than some Mario games. The level designs are super fun and make me look forward to playing each level. The difficulty is just right. It's tougher than Mario, but not too difficult. The visuals are dated, but I can appreciate how impressive they were at the time. The physics in the game feel really good. I see why everyone likes this game, and it doesn't stop there. I also played Donkey Kong Country 2, and it's even better. Most of it is somewhat the same. Graphics, physics, etc. However, the level designs are much more refined. They took something great and made it even better. The soundtrack is also absolutely amazing. You're gonna have a lot of fun with this one. And I had to finish up the trilogy with the third game. Honestly, I'd say this is on par with the first game. Doesn't feel like a big improvement like the second game was, but it's still a great time and worth playing for any platforming fan. These games don't stick out much to me individually, but they're perfect as a trilogy. Alright, enough of that. Let's get into Peak. Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney Trilogy. The Ace Attorney games are classic DS games, and I had fun playing the trilogy on Steam. You point at the environment to collect evidence, and then use the evidence in a trial to point out contradictions and solve a murder. Like we haven't had enough of those on this list. Ace Attorney is very different from Danganronpa though. How is it different? The main character wears blue. It's kind of a visual novel, but also kind of point and click. And it's a damn good game. The stories of each chapter are great. They're kind of disconnected, but honestly, they work really well. Not all of them are winners, but each game has much more good cases than bad. The characters are amazing and make you excited when they return in a future game. Let's start with the first game, Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney. In the grand scheme, this may not be one of the best games, but it's still a great start and an introduction to the series. The courtroom theme is absolutely iconic. Miles Edgeworth is one of the best prosecutors in the series. The mysteries are not as well hidden as other games, but they're still fun to be had here. Chapter 5 is really good, however it wasn't originally in the GBA game, but instead added to the DS release, and it kinda shows. Nonetheless, it has so many twists and turns, you just have to play it. Next is my personal favorite, Justice for All. It only has 4 chapters instead of 5, but these 4 chapters are done very well. Chapter 2 and 4 especially have very shocking plot twists. Franziska and Pearl are both great additions to the cast. The mysteries are much less obvious here, and it's a much more engaging experience. You can also present profiles, which adds much more options than a trial. Now we have Trials and Tribulations. It certainly has the best storytelling. Case 5 still kinda makes me cry on the inside. However, it has some of the worst mysteries. All of the culprits except for Chapter 5 are super obvious, and they barely try to hide some of them. It's actually my least favorite in the series so far because of this. Not to say it's bad, it's still got great moments, and Godot is one of my favorite characters, but I wish they did a better job with the mysteries. Overall, the Phoenix Wright trilogy is definitely amazing, worth anyone's time. And the fun doesn't stop there. This year I also played Apollo Justice. They certainly addressed my complaints from last time. The culprits are much less obvious, and I didn't get a single one right. The way the final chapter ties everything back together from other chapters was perfect. Apollo Justice isn't as good of a protagonist as Wright. He feels kinda generic in comparison, but he's fun enough. The other characters also didn't give me the same attachment as the Wright trilogy characters, but they were enjoyable. Overall, Apollo Justice is probably my second favorite in the series so far, behind Justice for All. Don't think I'm done talking about Ace Attorney. I'll be back. Okay, let's get into another Nintendo game. This time, Luigi's Mansion. Launch title for the Gamecube, and honestly one of the best games on it. This puts the Mario series in unusual settings. Sure, we've had ghost houses, but they weren't super creepy. While Luigi's Mansion isn't a horror game, it does a good job at creating a super creepy feeling. The graphics are pretty charming. It's not like the usual Mario art style. It kinda has that rubbery look of the N64 promo art. The lighting of the environment is just dark enough to feel creepy without being overly dark like some horror games. The sound effects are super suspenseful and the music is eerie. This is how you put Mario in a horror setting while still retaining the family-friendly Mario image. The mechanics work really well. Vacuuming ghosts feels really satisfying to control. I like the idea of fake doors to make you pay attention to the map. The characters are really well done here. Luigi starts to feel like his cowardly self, and Professor Egad is batshit insane as he should be. Exploring the mansion is really fun and the bosses have some creative ideas. Overall, Luigi's Mansion is one of the best Mario games of the franchise. Now we have Tori 3D, a cute little platformer with PS1 style graphics. The gameplay is pretty basic, it's your average 3D platformer, but the music and graphics have a lot of charm to them. It's short, but you can replay stages to get a better time, and collect all the stars to unlock more characters. There's not much more to it, but it's 99 cents, so you can't expect much more. Try it out if you're interested. Alright, now let's move on to something kinda similar to Danganronpa. Master Detective Archive's Raincode. A visual novel made by the same people with the same concept of solving murders, however it's not the same thing. First of all, it's 3D! It looks much better than UDG. The lighting is actually good. I'll even say it's fantastic. The color choices are on par with V3. Then there's the gameplay. Being able to run around the environment is an interesting way of investigating. On one hand, it can be confusing trying to figure out where you're supposed to go. On the other hand, running around makes you feel like you're actually investigating an area. The clues aren't going to be easily accessible for you. You need to really search everywhere. The story is a little more disconnected between chapters like Ace Attorney. It's really predictable. I managed to guess all the killers, and also guess some other plot twists. That's my main problem with the game. The mystery dungeons were cool, kinda like the trials, but they're more intense. It's not just pointing out contradictions, but also dodging out their statements. The characters were eh. The detectives were cool, but the ones that only appear in one chapter are very unnoteworthy. At least Ace Worthy has legendary characters like Spark Brucial. I think Chapter 0 was a very good introduction. Chapters 4 and 5 have amazing stories, and Chapter 1 and 2 are decent. Chapter 3 is not that great. The DLCs are all over the place. Yako has a fantastic one, Vivi has a good one, Halar's is okay, and the other two are trash. If you haven't bought the game already, I would suggest getting the Plus version since it has all the DLC and doesn't run like dog shit. Raincode is okay, but it's no Danganronpa. Alright, another controversial one, The Coffin of Andy and Lele. This one is notorious for intimate relation between characters who shouldn't have intimate relations, but getting past that, it was entertaining. It's an RPG Maker game, and I'd say it does a good job with the engine. Everything works as it should. The graphics are nice, not a lot of color outside of black and this weird grayish color. It makes the eye colors pop a lot more. The music is nothing to write home about, but I kinda like the instrument they use. The story is easy to follow and fun thanks to our two main characters. Ignoring the stuff that goes on between them, they are entertaining protagonists with banter between them that keeps the player entertained. There's also multiple endings that you can get, and considering the game is quite short, you can go for all of them no problem. There's been some really shocking moments that really grab you. If this interests you, give it a shot. However, I can see this not being your cup of tea. Here's something cool. Professor Layton and the Curious Village. Most of you know it as a DS game, but I played the HD mobile remake. Comparing it to the DS version, it's pretty faithful, so I'd recommend it. The gameplay is a bunch of puzzles, and they can range from easy to hard. Most of them are pretty clever and make you satisfied when you see the answer, however some of them are kinda just dumb. Layton and Luke are great, however the other characters don't really leave much of an impact. The cutscenes are beautifully animated. Of course I like the music. Combining that with the visuals creates an appropriate setting for the player to experience. Oddly enough, I noticed one of the answers for one of the multiple choice questions was replaced, which was odd. But that's minor. The story is good for the first entry, however it isn't nearly as batshit as later entries. Speaking of later entries, let's talk about the second game, Diabolical Box. This one is much better than the last game. The plot twist for this one is much more batshit insane, which is how it should be. The villain was really unexpected, and the plot twist at the end kinda hurts my brain. There are new puzzles, not much to comment about other than the fact that they are just as good. There's a new hamster minigame, and the voice acting for the hamster is hilarious. He should not sound like this. Many more of the characters leave an impact on you, which is good. But what is even better is the third game, Unwound Future. Everything I just talked about is better here. The twist is great, the villains have a lot more depth. You even get to learn about characters you thought you already knew. And the ending, oh man. The ending is so emotional. It's another one of the games that made me cry. The puzzles are pretty much the same old. They may not stick out from each other in terms of gameplay, but the original Professor Layton trilogy is full of stories that anyone will love. Now let's talk about a game I kinda already played before, but I played it again. Paper Mario The Thousand Year Door on Switch. I already beat it on the Gamecube, but by the time the Switch version came out, it had been over a year since I touched the Gamecube version, so I thought I'd give it another shot. I played it, and I can happily say it is still one of the greatest Nintendo games of all time. Mario with a story is not something you normally see in his platformers, but his RPGs have plenty of them. Paper Mario on N64 had a pretty lighthearted story, so going from that to this is crazy. Not that the N64 one is bad, but this is just so much better. The story gets pretty deep in this game. It can be predictable at times, but most of the time it's not. The relationship between characters makes you invested in their stories. The partners feel like they have a lot more depth to them than the N64 characters, and they feel more like actual characters than just abilities Mario can use. The setting of Rogueport feels unfamiliar. It's pretty dirty, and there's some criminals here, which is not something you would normally see in a Mario game. The graphics are even better here. I love the art style and the cardboard look. The frame rate is worse, which is a shame, but there's other things to appreciate. Dialogue has sound effects now, which I think help add to the characters, but also kind of slow things down while reading dialogue. The combat is just as good as the GameCube version. Pulling off attacks and timing everything to deal extra damage is super satisfying. It makes fighting enemies really fun. The Super Guard is a great addition that wasn't in the first game. It really integrates risk and reward. You don't lose coins when running anymore, which kinda encourages running instead of fighting, sadly. Finding badges and leveling up to get an upgrade is exciting because you get to explore more of the combat. The partners are not just great characters, but also incredibly useful and fun to use in the fights. They both have individual health, but if Mario dies, the fight ends while the fight continues if the partner dies, making you prioritize Mario and question what to do with your partner. I'd say the difficulty is fair. It's easy at the beginning and gets harder, but it's never unfair. Exploring the areas and talking to NPCs is fun because the characters feel unique. The OST is great, but what I appreciate is that you can get the old songs. There's not much new content, but what's here is great. If you haven't tried this game, or want to revisit it, Paper Mario The Thousand Year Door on Switch or GameCube is a great game to play. Mega Man 2, a classic NES game. I finished the first one in 2023 and wasn't too excited to play this one, but it turned out to be pretty good. The levels in this one I think are much more fun and well designed. The bosses are also a lot more fun and challenging in the fight. A lot of the game is still similar to the first one, so you still have some quirks of being an NES game, but honestly I think it's one of the better aged games of its era. I also like that it's longer and there's some bosses you wouldn't expect. The difficulty is pretty good, hard but not unfair. The OST is what makes it for me. It is absolutely amazing and probably my favorite NES game soundtrack. Try it out if you haven't. We've got Frog Detective! It's a mystery solving game, but the charm comes from the graphics and dialogue. It's very cute and silly overall, and you'll get a kick out of it. A lot of the game is talking to NPCs and doing quests for others, as well as exploring the island. It's very short, but I'd say it's worth your time. I also played the second one! It retains the same charm as the first, and I'd say the story is a little better. Not much more to say. Now we have Rugrats Adventures in Gameland, which I got for free on Epic Games. I've only seen a few Rugrats episodes a really long time ago, but I enjoyed them. This game is actually an NES game. There's an NES ROM and you can switch between the retro and modern graphics and music. There's some charm to it, but also you can kind of tell it's an NES game without the classic graphics or music because mechanics can be a little clunky. The way everything moves kind of reminds me of Mario 2 and doesn't feel as fluid as other platformers. You've only got 6 levels, so it's short, but it's kind of expected from an NES game. I think the modern graphics are a little rough. Something about them looks kinda cheap. The classic graphics are pretty good though. The level design is great. There were challenges, but I was never confused on what to do or where to go. The bosses were super fun to play against. The collectibles were easy, but a nice addition for anyone who likes to go for 100%. The 4 different playable characters are nice to have, which is why I didn't want to choose the highest difficulty since you can only use one character. I think Rugrats are good for any retro game fan or Rugrats fan, but otherwise nothing noteworthy. Now we've got a ROM hack, SL64. Luigi replacing Mario isn't the only change here, there's a bunch of new levels. Unfortunately, I don't think they're that great. They're all pretty similar, basic layouts don't look great. A lot of the stars have you doing the same things over and over. There are some hilarious things like this box being a boss, but overall, the hack didn't feel like it had a lot of care put into it. I'm not trying to be mean, I understand that this was a ROM hack from kind of a long time ago, so maybe my standards shouldn't be as high, but I didn't enjoy this hack that much, but I'm sure the person can achieve something great. Alright, ending off the games I started and beat this year is the Eye of the Somnium Files series. Prepare for more visual novel rambling, because that's actually my entire personality. Eye of the Somnium Files is a series where you play as a detective and you solve a case of serial killings and investigate crime scenes while also getting information from others by going into their brain and receiving their memories. All of this happens while more victims pop up. Your decisions can lead you to different paths where different events happen, so you may not learn the whole truth in one route. We'll start with the first game, which is about the Cyclops serial killings. The corpses in this one are quite bloody, which is good. I'm not the type of person who automatically loves blood and gore and thinks it should be everywhere, but a corpse in a murder mystery game should be bloody. The missing eye just adds so much creepiness. The visuals are outstanding, the models are nice, and the lighting is eye candy. The characters are super good. Kaname Date is a fantastic protagonist, and the others have their own traits that make you attached to them and make you worry when they act suspicious. Except Ota. He's too Ota. The Somniums are great. They can be funny, weird, and horrifying with the color schemes and other ridiculous events. Playing the Somniums can be a bit frustrating. There's a lot of bullshit, and some of the paths are really hard to find, but the story makes up for it. There's so many twists and turns in the game that really fuck with your brain. It really encourages you to think and pay attention to what's happening. The humor stuck with me. It's similar to Danganronpa. Not for everyone, but it's for me, therefore it's good. The soundtrack is great. The music with vocals can be kinda cringe, but it fits the game, so I wouldn't have it any other way. The funny moments are funny, but the serious moments are very serious. The game can be sort of dark at times, and that's a good thing because it really enhances the story. Now let's talk about the sequel, Nirvana Initiative. First off, we've got 2 protagonists, and I'd say neither of them are good as Date. They just didn't stick out as much and kind of felt more like generic protagonists. Now the story for this one is a little different. Instead of taking out the eye, the bodies are cut in half, with one half being found immediately and the other half being found 6 years later. I get that it's supposed to be grotesque since it's half a body, but honestly I think the missing eye corpses are a lot creepier. The game has 2 parts. 6 years ago where we play as Ryuki, and the present where we play as Mizuki. I think the 2 periods of time are handled well and work well together. I'd say the game is less darker in tone, but it fucks with your brain a whole lot more. Like, the plot twists actually make you question what the fuck just happened. I think the supporting cast isn't nearly as good as the previous games, and the previous game's cast takes a backseat here with a few exceptions, but the villains are excellent. Their influence over the events of the game is pretty insane. We've got new investigation segments where you walk around in a virtual version of the crime scene with features like X-ray and thermal. This makes it feel kind of like a rain code where investigation actually feels like searching. Somniums in this game are much better. They feel creepier and are actually somewhat easy to navigate, although the final Somnium isn't as good as the final Somnium of the first game. I think a huge problem with this game is that it kind of ignores a lot of the first game. The beginning asks you if you played the first game or not, and even quizzes you. But I think they should have done that. Saying you've played the game really only changes minor dialogue. Everything else is pretty much the same. It honestly feels like they just reset the universe as if none of the events of the first game happened. I know they acknowledge some of the events of the first game, but the characters kind of feel like they were unaffected by what happened. I'm sure they did this because the first game might not have sold the best, so they wanted the sequel to be more accessible, but I think it kind of hinders the actual game. And if they make a third, I hope they embrace the fact that it's a third game and spoil the first 2 games as much as they want. Also, the other endings of the game aren't as good. The endings don't feel like they've reached proper conclusions. While the endings of the first one don't exactly treat you like the mystery was solved, it felt like they ended where they should have. Speaking of endings, this game's ending leaves a lot of questions, and I hope a third game does come out. Okay, here's a section with only a few games. Games I started in 2024 and have already beaten in 2025. Frog Detective 3. This one lets you ride a scooter, which is a great improvement. It makes the exploration so much faster, it makes the game feel a little less boring. The story is also much better than the other 2, and overall this game is the best in the trilogy. Sonic the Hedgehog on Master System. I already played the Genesis games last year, so I wanted to try the Master System ones. Sonic Origins has the GameCube version, but I wanted to play the Master System version since it doesn't have the screen crunch. My thoughts? Well, it certainly is a game that they made. It's coded properly and functions fine. However, it is not very fun at all. These levels are just the worst to traverse through. So many confusing layouts. The physics are kinda janky and not nearly as good as the Genesis version. The sounds makes the ears fucking explode. I do not recommend playing this game. Now for an actual decent platformer, Yoshi's Story. I expected it to be very similar to Yoshi's Island, but it was more different than I thought. Instead of getting to the end, you have to collect a certain amount of fruit. You can choose which level to play, but you don't need to do all of them. You only need to do a few. Because of that, the game is very short and honestly kind of underwhelming. Not every game needs to be super long, but they should have substance, and I think that's what makes this worse than Yoshi's Island. It's very lacking and ends too early. Staying on the note of Mario spin-offs, Luigi's Mansion 2. Unlike the first Luigi's Mansion, this one is more mission-based and in my opinion isn't as good. Part of the charm of the original game was exploring everything in the mansion, and everything was happening in the same mansion. You never leave this location. This game has 5 separate mansions that are similar to worlds in Mario games. It feels like these mansions aren't quite as fleshed out as the one in Luigi's Mansion. You don't get the same feeling of discovery like in the original game. The missions also aren't as good, but it's still a good game. I liked having the upgrades that give you an incentive to collect coins. The online multiplayer is really fun and controls well. Luigi's Mansion 2 is also pretty fun, just not as good as the first one. Captain Toad Treasure Tracker. They basically took the levels from 3D World and made them a full-fledged game. The level designs are changed. Instead of these boxes, we've got much bigger levels with different shapes. I like this change because it means more variety in the layout. The level designs were actually pretty clever and used the mechanics of the game well. Locking certain levels and forcing you to collect diamonds is similar to 3D World with the green stars and does a good job at incentivizing you to collect the diamond, which is fun to do. The camera kind of felt a little stiff at times, and it was kind of awkward to move. Another awkward thing is the port on the screen. It gets desynced all the time, you can't resync it like 3D World or Galaxy and 3D All-Stars. It's a shame you can't play the 3D World levels here. They could have updated it after Bowser's Fury came out. But the new Odyssey levels are really fun, and DLC is fantastic. Captain Toad Treasure Tracker is a very good experience. Time for another treasure hunting game, this time, the first Uncharted. Specifically, the remastered version. The visuals look a little dated, but they're fun enough. The music is absolutely amazing. Doing the parkour in the environment felt fun instead of like a chore. Shooting's very intense, and having different guns was cool. Finding secret treasures was really fun, and the story was pretty good. I can't wait to play the second one. Job Simulator is our final game in this section, and it is great. You work in a future where robots take over. You've got 4 different jobs and all of them have different tasks. You serve customers, but the fun is being able to just fuck around. You can give customers burnt food, steal their tires, eat all the donuts. No one cares. There's a lot of little details too, which is great. I had a blast with this, and I'm super excited to play a vacation simulator. Alright, now let's talk about games I started this year, but unfortunately didn't finish. These sections are going to be shorter since I'm not finished and haven't formed full thoughts. World's End Club! Oh no. I don't know if you know this, but I really like games where a bunch of classmates are forced to play a game where you kill each other hosted by a black and white mascot. So when I saw World's End Club, I was excited to play it. Unfortunately, the game is terrible. Barely anything interesting happens throughout the whole game, and when something does happen, it was too late and I don't care. The game drags way too long. There's so many sections you could have easily cut out to increase the pace. I'm gonna finish it, but I'm not gonna like it! Danganronpa S Ultimate Summer Camp. Unlike other Danganronpa games, this isn't about killing each other. It's also non-canon. It's an extended version of the board game mode in V3. I played a few rounds and had fun with it, but didn't experience a ton of the game. I do want to experience more of the game to see more of it. I know a lot of people don't like this one, and I can absolutely see why, but I think there's some merit to it. 999. 9 hours, 9 persons, 9 doors. I previously mentioned the Odyssey Files games, and they actually made this and the other Zero Escape games before that, so we wanted to try these. I'm glad to say 999 is living up to my expectations so far. It's very high stakes, and I like the branching paths of the story. The characters I'd say resonated with me quite well. Hopefully that will still be the case by the end. I'm playing the PC version, and you can kinda tell it's a DS game still. But honestly, I don't think that really hinders it too much. The story has a lot of mysteries, and make me really excited to solve them. I can't say much more, but I'm glad I'm playing this, and I hope to beat this and the other Zero Escape games. Alright, that's enough visual novels. Now we can focus on— Just kidding! You really thought I was gonna stop talking about visual novels? Cemetery Mary! It's a free visual novel on Steam, so why wouldn't I play it? The characters are probably some of my favorite in any visual novel. I like how your decisions affect which ending you get. There's a lot of unsolved mysteries I'm hoping to find out when I finish the game. I got the bad ending recently. Hopefully I can get the other ending soon. Okay, let's actually take a break from visual novels with Super Mario Party Jamboree. I'm a huge fan of the Mario Party series, so I was excited when this got announced in a Nintendo Direct. I was really glad they were going the Mario Kart route of having new and old content. So what did I think of the actual game? It's amazing. The boards are very good. 7 boards and only 2 bad ones. Roll-'em Wasteway is not very good. The stars being in only 2 places is boring, and I don't like the linear layout. This is the type of shit you'd find in Mario Party 1. Speaking of Mario Party 1, Mario's Rainbow Castle is the other one I don't like. I never liked linear boards. I get they do something clever with switching between Toad and Bowser, but that really doesn't matter when the actual board isn't fun or interesting. Castaway Bay in Mario Party 6 does the same thing, and that one sucks ass too. But the other boards are fantastic. Mega Wiggler's Tree Party is a perfect beginner board, being easy to get while also being nice and big, full of interesting events to not bore veteran players. Yuma's Lagoon has the high tide mechanic that makes you weary of where you are in the board. Rainbow Galleria puts a lot of emphasis on the item shop, which can be really fun if you got cash. King Bowser's Keep might just be the best Bowser board. The layout is nice, and the Imposter Bowser is brutal, as he should be. Western Land is one of my favorite boards, and they did it justice here. I like the changes with the train and the new items. The minigames are really fun. They brought back many of the best ones, and a lot of these new ones are great. Gatekeepers is fucking annoying though. I don't like how you have to use a Joy-Con for the motion control minigames. Many of them could have been played with a Pro Controller. Pro Rules is pretty ass. They take out the hidden blocks and chance time. What's the point? The absolute random bullshit luck is what makes Mario Party so good. They restrict you to 12 turns, which is such an odd number. It should be changeable. It's a shame because there's some ideas I like here, such as dueling for a star, like in Mario Party 5, and having markers to see where the star will land. I wish you could customize it more. Maybe I want 20 turns and star markers. Maybe I want random minigames and out-of-stock items. I also wish they brought back the minigame packs from Mario Party 4 so you could filter out minigames you don't like. A lot of side modes are really good. Coin-a-thon and Bowser's Kaboom Squad are super fun in line. There's so much chaos, it's super fun, although it's weird you can't play as Bowser when you can literally play as them in the Coin-a-thon minigames. Isn't this literally why Imposter Bowser exists? The rhythm game mode is back, and it's just as fun as it was in Super. The minigame modes are pretty basic, but pretty fun. However, it's not really a play random minigame modes and win the most mode. You kind of have that, but you can only play short-out minigames, the daily minigame packs, boss minigames, or 2v2s. Toad Item Factory is okay, use motion controls to navigate the ball to the goal. The controls got a little finicky, and it's not something I'd revisit. The same goes for Paratroopa's Flight School. It functions okay, but I don't want to play it. Also, it's weird that player 1 has to be Mario and player 2 has to be Luigi. Why can't I pick my character? The online works good from what I've played. Overall, it's not the best. I think I still prefer Mario Party 2, but I think it's tied with Mario Party 6 for the second best. I haven't played the single player yet, but I'll play it eventually. Portal, a 3D puzzle game, giving you a portal gun to get to different areas and solve puzzles using cubes. I really like these puzzles. I think they work well with the portal mechanic. It never feels like a puzzle is too hard. It's actually enjoyable to solve the puzzles. Half-Life. I can't talk too much about this one since I'm very early in the game, but I like what I played. Hotline Miami. This game is awesome. You break into a room and start beating the shit out of people, but getting hit once means you have to start all over. It combines combat with puzzles. You gotta beat the shit out of people, but you also have to strategize and plan out all your moves. You've got different masks, which gives you different abilities, and there's different weapons to use. The enemies also use these weapons, which gives some variation, as you don't know which weapons the enemies will have. The levels have different elements, which the player has to take into consideration. Opening doors, shooting through glass, and even shooting bombs. It's a very good game. Despite all the planning out, it still feels very fast-paced and high thrills because of the combat. Highly recommend this one. Zelda 2. Unlike many other Zelda games, this one has RPG elements. It's very different, and I'd say I'm not enjoying it as much as Zelda 1, but it's still good. There's a lot of emphasis on the world, letting you talk to NPCs and explore many different places. I like being able to upgrade your stats to enhance your abilities. The enemies are much more tough than Zelda 1, which can be good, but it can also be tedious. I think exploring the actual levels isn't as fun as the dungeons in Zelda 1, but it's okay. Metroid! I played this one for a bit, and then I got to a part where I needed an upgrade that I didn't have, so I had to restart, which was a bummer. Since I already had to restart, I decided I tried to remake Zero Mission instead, and I'd say it's much better. The sprites are beautiful, the sound is nice, and the mechanics feel much smoother. The biggest improvement for me is the map. Much easier to navigate than the NES version. I really like exploring this place. It feels easy enough to make progress, which is great. Earthbound Beginnings! I had this on Wii U, but never played it until the Switch version came out. The music is really good. The fights work fine, but aren't as visually impressive as something like Final Fantasy, even though the characters have more detail. There's no animations, and you can't see what Nintendo does. It looks like Pokemon, but without the player. I can't comment much more since I'm not very far in the game. Now the Kangaroo. I had to play this one with the keyboard, which was rough. It doesn't control too great. Movement has a similar issue to Mario 64 DS or the original Crash, where you can only move in 8 directions in a 3D environment. The camera also doesn't control too great. The levels can be tough, and it would be fun if the controls were better. Die the Tasmanian Tiger. A cool platform where you collect stuff and use boomerangs. I'm stuck on a part, but I hope to get past it and continue it. Ace Attorney Investigations Miles Edgeworth. This game follows his journey as a prosecutor investigating crimes and confronting witnesses. He does a good job at implementing Ace Attorney gameplay and story without the court. Chaos Head Noah. A friend told me to play the Steins Gate series, but I noticed the games were a part of a bigger series called Steins Adventure, and this is a remaster of the first one, so I'm starting with this. I like what I've played, but I haven't played much. The Jackbox Naughty Pack. A weird attempt to make a game known for raunchiness even raunchier. It tries a little too hard with the sexual stuff. It's a shame because faking it with online play is really good. I haven't played the other two modes yet. Jackbox Survey Scramble. A surprise release. This game features a bunch of questions you answer, then the answers get updated on the fly based on the rankings, so they will change in the future playthroughs. It's a cool idea, but honestly, a lot of these game modes are kinda weak. I don't think answering these questions are fun in any game mode. I haven't tried the game modes in the update, but I played all the original ones and they weren't great. There wasn't enough shock value from seeing the answers that made it fun. Nintendo World Championships NES Edition. I expected something similar to the NES cartridge, but it's more like NES Remix from the Wii U. You play bite-sized NES challenges with a timer. You can then replay challenges to get a better time. It's kinda like WarioWare in a sense, but more focused on succeeding in individual challenges rather than doing a bunch. They really put emphasis on the competition aspect. There's an online leaderboard and you play with up to 8 players. That's a pretty insane amount. I played it with some friends and it was pretty fun, but I don't care to play it much on my own. Whether you're familiar with the NES library or haven't played it, I think this game is just okay. Fully, a game that I know a lot of people play it on the PS2, but I played it on Steam. You can go to a school and fuck around, but don't get caught by the prefix. I really like it. A good balance of freedom and strictness. Gravity Circuit, inspired by Mega Man, but you gotta hold a lot of different moves. And it's more about melee than shooting. It's pretty fun. Vernal Edge. Kinda like Mega Man Zero. I really like the world in this game. Super Monkey Ball Touch and Roll. An interesting Monkey Ball game. I think they want you to use the touchscreen, but I just use the D-pad. Levels are fine, sprite work is cute, nothing much more. Undertale. A really popular indie game a few years ago. I owned it for a while, but I'm now just trying it. I really like it. The sprite work and music complement each other to immerse you in the world. The fights are fun, and the story is excellent from what I've played. Beanie, a platformer in the style of an SNES game. I really like the visuals here, but I'm not digging the movement. Downwell, a really fun platform where you go down a well, defeating enemies and avoiding obstacles. Every time you clear the stage, you can get an upgrade. The gameplay is really fast, which I like. Rivals of Aether. A fighting game I've heard of but never played until recently. I tried it and it works really smoothly. I like it just as much as Smash. Your Turn to Die. Death game by majority. I wanted more Danganronpa-like games, so I tried this one out. I initially wasn't feeling it at first, but by the end of Chapter 1, I was very hooked. Shy Guy Surfing, a fan game where you surf on water while the screen scrolls to the right. I really like the replayability with all the unlockables and customization. The bosses are also fun to fight. Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3. It has Phoenix Wright, so I needed to try it. I don't have much experience with fighting games, but honestly I think I prefer to Smash. I may just be tired of Smash, but I like how the gameplay is just much faster, and the hits feel like they make more of an impact. I also just like running out of health better than knocking someone off a stage. Professor Layton the Last Spectre. A prequel to Professor Layton. The gameplay is about the same, but the story doesn't seem to be as good as the previous two. Sackboy: A Big Adventure. I really like Little Big Planet 3, so I was excited to try this. It certainly hasn't disappointed so far. There's a lot of creativity, and it's really nice, and the controller sounds are really fun. Spider-Man Remastered. I like Marvel, and I think Spider-Man is peak MCU. Turns out, he's got good games too. The web slinging and combat are super fun and actually make you feel like Spider-Man. Pikmin. I wanted to try out some Nintendo games, so I bought Pikmin for the Switch. Basically, you can use the Pikmin to do things like destroy walls, defeat enemies, and carry objects, including ship parts you need to retrieve. I'll be honest, it's not my thing. It's very slow, you need to keep track of a lot of things. There's been so many times where I'm confused and just don't know what to do. Also, the time limit doesn't exactly help either. I'll still finish it, but I don't know if I'm gonna play 2 through 4. Little Nightmares. This game has a really good creepy atmosphere. The lighting, models, and the sound effects are all top notch. The gameplay is good. It's a platformer with not necessarily a lot of moves for the player to do, but you can solve puzzles and sneak away from danger. It's been fun so far. Crypt of the Necrodancer. A cool rhythm game with dungeons. It's super fun. I don't have a ton of experience with dungeon games other than Zelda 1, but I really like this one. Banjo-Kazooie. A lot of people swear by this one as one of the best N64 games, and honestly, I don't think so. It's been very confusing. Like, I have no idea where the fuck I'm supposed to go, or what the fuck I'm supposed to do. Super Mario RPG Legend of the Seven Stars. I've played games in both the Mario Luigi series and the Paper Mario series, but not this. Honestly, I think it's pretty good. The environments look like little boxes, and the characters have this sort of rubbery look. I really like the lighting too. The mechanics work solid, and the music is great. Shin Megami Tensei Persona. I know a lot of people love Persona. People have told me to play 3 through 5, but I wanted to start with the first one. Specifically the PSP remake. Similar to Metroid, I tried the PS1 version and got stuck on a part where I had to go to the hospital because the map sucks. I've really enjoyed the story so far. The character designs are good, and the OST is fucking amazing. Currently, I'm stuck on a part where I keep getting into a fight, but all my characters are on low HP, so I keep dying. Hopefully I can get past it soon. Twisted Metal Black. After 3 and 4 kinda disappointed me, Twisted Metal Black has restored my faith. Being the first M-rated game in the series, it's much more dark and gritty. I'd say it actually works here, unlike other games where the dirty and dark look kinda just makes it look bland. The cutscenes are much more unhinged and violent, which I love. The vehicle combat actually works well, unlike 3 and 4, which glitch constantly. The darker presentation is a huge strength of the game, and really makes sense considering the lore of the game. Paper Mario Sticker Star. I really like the first 3 Paper Mario games. I'm not a fan of this one. It tries to be more of an RPG after Super was more of a platformer, but the sticker mechanics weren't nearly as fun as something like the badges. The world feels much more like generic Mario, unlike the last 2 games. Hell, even 64, which sort of felt like generic Mario, had more variety. There's no interesting characters to meet, it's all Toads. There's a bunch of backtracking you have to do, and it's kind of annoying. It brings back the individual levels from Super, but it worked there because it was a platformer. This is an RPG! I'm not enjoying this game too much. Doki Doki Literature Club Plus. I'm sure we all remember the hubbub of this game from a few years ago, but I haven't played it until recently. It was actually free on Valentine's Day on Epic Games. I haven't gotten too far, but I really like the characters. I don't really care for making poems though. Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, the game. I love Scott Pilgrim the movie and the show. Haven't read the comics yet, but I'll do it eventually. This is probably one of the tougher beat 'em ups I played. I also played River City Girls 2, and I got my ass kicked in that one. I guess they're both tied for hardest beat 'em ups I played. Both are beating Castle Crashers. I really like the combat, sprite work, and music. Speaking of River City Girls 2, I tried it with a friend and we got our ass kicked. But it was fun, and having a map to see where you're going. Mega Man 3. For the most part, I can't say it's much different from the second one, other than the fact that they added a slide, which is awesome. Super Mario Eclipse. A really cool Mario Sunshine ROM hack. It's got new characters and new areas that are really well designed. Really exceeded my expectations so far. Wario Land 2. Compared to Wario Land 1, I like the level designs much better. I also really like the minigames you can play to gamble coins or earn treasure. Kirby's Adventure 3D Classics. It's much better than Kirby's Dream Land on the Game Boy. Kirby has copy abilities that he's known for, but also being on the NES, you have a bigger screen, which allows you to appreciate the levels more. The 3DS version also gets rid of the slowdown. Nier Automata. I enjoyed Nier Gestalt in 2023, and this seems to be more of that, but more refined, which I like. Alien Hominid HD. I already beat Alien Hominid 360, so this is nothing new, but it's still fun. Ghost Trick Phantom Detective. Made by the people who made Ace Attorney. This game is also a detective game, but instead of smaller stories divided by chapters, it's one long story. I think the concept of being a ghost and going back in time to possess objects and change a situation is really cool and done well. Donut Dodo. It clearly takes inspiration from older arcade games with fast-paced gameplay, pixelated sprites, and upbeat music. The movement is really smooth and the game gets intense, it's really fun. Cash Cow DX. Made by the same team behind Donut Dodo, it's also an older arcade-style game. The levels in this one are much bigger, and it's kinda hard to avoid enemies. I'd recommend it. A Hat in Time. A really cool platformer with different hats for different abilities. The platforming in this one is really fun. DuckTales Remastered. A remade version of the NES game with great art and fluid movement. The pogo stick is really fun to use, and the levels are well designed. Donkey Kong on Game Boy. Commonly referred to as Donkey Kong 94, this game is great. It starts out as if it was just a handheld version of the arcade game, but then you get a bunch of new levels to play. Mario's got a bunch of moves that he's never had in 2D games prior, and he feels really awesome to control. The levels have some clever designs, although sometimes they can be kinda bullshit. Super Meat Boy. Very fast gameplay. Basically, you get to the end, but the levels are quite challenging. I'd imagine it'd be really fun to speedrun this game, I'm not a speedrunner, but I still really like this game. We Love Golf, made by the Mario Golf devs. Well, I'd say it's not quite as good as Total Tour, since the motion controls aren't that great. It's still a solid golf game. Also, it has Apollo Justice and Pearl Face, so obviously it's good. Yoshi's Island DS. Unlike Yoshi's Story, this one goes back to more classic style Yoshi's Island, but this one has different babies with different abilities. I like this one a whole lot more. Mario & Luigi Superstar Saga. I beat the main story on the 3DS, but I wanted to try the GBA version. The sprite work here is really nice, and I might prefer it to the 3DS version. I'm also going through Bowser's Minion on the 3DS version. Gravity Rush Remastered. I really like the way this game looks and plays. The cutscenes are phenomenal, and the motion controls work really well. Finally, we have Donkey Kong Country on the Game Boy Color. Compared to the SNES version, this version is kinda bad. There's a lot of slowdown, and it feels clunky to control. It's impressive hardware-wise, but not really fun to play today. There we have my 2024 games! Playing video games is my third favorite activity alongside breathing and blinking. I really like the visual novels. Danganronpa, Ace Attorney, and I the Somnium Files are super great experiences that anyone should check out. There's a tons of games I didn't get to try, and I hope to play more of them in 2025. Let me know what you played in 2024, and if you're interested in playing the games I mentioned. I really wanted to get this out before January ended, but I clearly didn't. I hope you still enjoyed it though. Thanks for watching.